Can I get my 2 cents?
Well, if you're not too long, we'll let you.
Mr. Young? Mr. Young. Nice to meet you. I'm the village boy.
I thought there was just one survey.
You can't talk behind my back.
You ready? We'll open the public hearing. First, let me say I apologize for being late. Sometimes we don't get all the information we should. And I'd like to thank you for all coming out tonight. I know that there's no baseball game, so at least we have a free night. This meeting is open to the public. You'll get the public input. My only request is that we limit you to 5 minutes so that everybody gets a chance to speak. And all your questions should be directed to the board of Champlain and the town of Champlain. And we'll open the meeting to the public. You want to start off by saying anything? One thing I would like to add is that did you all receive a copy of the town of Champlain Fire Protection Area? This gives you some insight of what has been done and what we've gone through. And it gives you a tentative tax rate on the formation of a fire district. And there are some pointers in there that maybe will answer some of the questions that you have. I'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you. I'm just going to stand up so everybody in the back can hear me. I like Arnie, would like to thank everyone for coming. I don't know if he's a Red Sox fan, but some of us are sad that there's not a baseball game tonight. We had a couple packets out with the town packet, a summary of an informational packet we did last month, and also a one-page handout on a joint fire district. Arnie and I guess, independently put together documents that are very, very similar. As I tried to get ready for this meeting, it really occurred to me that when you get so involved in these details sometimes, you forget that you're looking at the trees and maybe the forest isn't so clear anymore. And for somebody coming into this is all new terminology. So if Arnie doesn't mind, I would just like to briefly go through with you what a joint fire district is, why the Village of Champlain is proposing it, and then through the budget. And then I think maybe that will facilitate the questions a little better, because I'd like to at least have some basic information before we have you asking questions. I'd like to introduce this gentleman you may not know. This is Mr. William Young. He's an attorney actually chief counsel for the Association of Fire Districts. Hello. And of course, my board, I think they all have their nameplates facing out, so Kim, Scott, Doug, and Albert. When I first was hit with the proposal of a fire district, and I'm sure our firemen might be able to concur with this, it didn't sound really like something I wanted to get involved with. It was a lot different, and there were a lot of what I thought were real drawbacks in it, and it sat for many, many years before our board. It's really just been in the past couple that we've looked at it seriously. And obviously at this point we're here because we think that this is a proposal that the community really should consider. What we'd like to do tonight is hear what you have to say. We're at the step where we need public feedback, because then both of our boards have to decide at some point in the future whether or not to go ahead with this fire district. And so I think it's really crucial that we hear what you have to say about this joint fire district. The best thing I can compare it to would be a school district, because it is not a municipal board. It's not the village, it's not the town. It's a legally designated area with a certain job to do, very specific, and that's fire protection and ambulance services, unless you separate into two separate districts. That is not run by the village board or the town board. The fire district is run by a board of commissioners who can either be elected by the people or appointed by the village and town boards. That board of commissioners, like a school board, has total control over fire and EMS services. They oversee the operations of the department. They prepare the budget. They set the tax rate. So it is a new level of government with a significant amount of control. They would pass the tax rate on to the town, it would go on the town tax bills, but it would not have to be approved by either the town or the village. So we need to say that right up front. And I know that's the reason for a lot of public concern about it. This is called a joint fire district because it would include a village, the village of Champlain, and all of the area in the town outside of the village of Rouse's Point. So it's a joint district formed between the village and the town initially. Once that district is formed, though, the village and town lines go away. And people who are residing in that area pay based upon the assessed value of their property for their fire protection. There's no more in-village rate, out-of-village rate. The rate would be the same based upon how much it costs to provide the money that the budget requires. Okay, so those are just a couple quick things about a fire district. Why we thought it was a good idea. Because the village board obviously has been advocating this for quite a while. Right now, the town of Champlain contributes more than half of our budget. They will, with the $55,000 contribution they made to us this year, they will pay for more than half of the fire protection done by the Champlain Fire Department. They account for about half of our calls, generally. We're in a situation, however, right now where they have no control other than a year's contract over what the fire department does. So one of the advantages we saw was that this fire district would give town residents control, either by having a voice in who is appointed or by directly electing. So that's one advantage. Probably the biggest concern that we have is preparing for the future. As you know, it's expensive to run a fire department and an ambulance. The town board has made major increases in what they've contributed to our department in recent years. If you get a chance to look at that packet and see how the contribution has gone up, it has gone up tremendously in 2 years, and that's been a big help to the village. But when you look at planning for the future, it's very difficult to commit to, say, replacement of a major vehicle, a new ambulance, which is probably the first thing we may need. Let's say we need a new pumper truck or whatever. The village board would have to vote to borrow that money. We would know that the town has a contract with us for this year, but we would have no guarantee of what would be happening in the future. So it's very difficult to commit the residents of the village to paying for something when we're not sure what the contribution would be. I mean, boards change, elected representatives change. It's possible that people could get elected who didn't like the fact that the town is sending a very large check to the village of Champlain every year. So that's an issue. The other thing about the joint fire district, by sharing in the cost over the total assessed value of the district, there is money available to put aside for replacement of an ambulance, for training, for those things that will be needed in the future to make sure that when there's a call, the guys and girls, the fire responders and EMS responders that go out on that call have the proper training and the proper equipment they need. And that's really what we're looking for. And so my last thing, I don't think, I always used to tell my kids, it's not good to do something just because everyone else is doing it. But if you look around New York State and you look at very small villages like ours, and we are a small village, we're about half the size of our sister over in, to the east, Rouse's Point. Our assessed value is a little actually less than that. You'll find very few small villages running departments because growth in many places has gone out into the towns, like it has here recently, and that's a process that just seems to be continuing. That's why so many places have gone through this transition that we are proposing. And it's why it's the recommended action from Albany to our local emergency management. They feel it's the way for us to go. So that just gives you a little bit of background on why we support it. If you haven't had a chance to look at the fire district budget, it's on page 2 of the packet. This is just a proposal. This would have to be ironed out by the Board of Commissioners. But we had to give you something so you had a sense of what your tax rate might be, where the spending might be. This budget is almost exactly the same as the current budget we're running this year in the village of Champlain, except for, having said that, almost exactly, except for a couple of major differences. It does include in the normal fire department, ambulance, fire station, debt service expenses, insurance, that's pretty much what we'll have to spend regardless of whether it's a fire district or not. But we did put in $20,000 for capital reserve, so that should we have to replace the ambulance, we don't have to swallow the $110,000 cost all in 1 year, or bond it all and pay the interest on it. This would allow us to start preparing for the future. It also includes a $55,000 payment to the Village of Rouse's Point, and this is really important to emphasize. Fire protection in the Rouse's Point side of the town, the Rouse's Point Fire District, would stay exactly as it is now. There would be a contract with the Village of Rouse's Point to provide fire protection, and there's a $55,000 payment in there for that. When you take the total in the proposed budget, it comes up to almost $177,000. Divide that up among all the assessment in the Village of Champlain and everything in the town outside of Rouse's Point, and you come up with a tax rate of $108,000. Now, what is that? $108 per thousand? $1.08 per thousand? I always have troubles with numbers in this room. I don't know why. For what that means to the average person out in the town, it would mean a 37-cent per thousand increase from what you're paying this year. So on a $70,000 home, you'd likely see something about $26 per year more for fire and ambulance. You'd know it was going directly to fire and ambulance because that would be the line item off to the fire district. I believe that the town is projecting an increase regardless this year to 84 cents per thousand. And that would mean that over what you would actually be paying next year, it'd probably be about $17 per each house. I'm going to get this right. $17 additional for each house. Okay? Now, in the village, because the amount we spend on fire protection is a bit higher than in the town, our numbers actually drop by about 13 cents per thousand. So village residents currently would be paying a bit more, about $9 more per year than they would after the joint fire district. So as you can see, and I really want to emphasize this started out for me at least as a financial thing, and I know I'm way over my 5 minutes, aren't I? This started out as a financial issue. If you look back in our sheets, in the village, we used to pay well over $250 per thousand for fire. The town has come through with much increased payments. It has brought our costs way down. I mean, in terms of the tax rate in my village, which is at $5.99, a 13-cent drop is not going to be a huge difference to the average taxpayer. The reason that we're supporting it is not because of the $9 per household, it's because of what we can get in terms of planning for the future if we go ahead and organize this district. Thank you very much. I appreciate everybody's patience and listening.
A minute over, that's
6 minutes? All right, it's a record. Thank you.
Moore's explaining the whole thing.
So now at this time, we would like comment from the public. I would like to add that, tonight there will be no decision made by this board on any matters. That this is entirely a public hearing, a public hearing only. So if you're going to complain or you're going to brag, now's the time to do it. So who's going to be first? See a hand back here. Would you state your name and where you're from?
You bet. Champlain Jr., Champlain, New York, and I rise in support of the creation of a separate, a town-wide fire and ambulance district. Thank you.
All of you people out there, a couple of you must have something to say. You got some good ideas?
I spent over an hour this afternoon up here with you. If the village does not want to cooperate and be part of this, why are we funding them to the tune of $55,000?
Did you say
You
the
see, the
village
village of
doesn't want
Rouse's
to?
Point does not want to be
Well, the
part
village of Rouse's Point? Well, the village of Rouse's Point protects a part of the district now. It's my understanding that the village of Rouse's Point will still protect that part of the district. I believe that you're in, Rodney, for ambulance and fire service. For that protection, they want $55,000 a year. That's what they have explained to us in a budget request for the year 2000 tentative budget.
Well, my next question is, why the disparity in the number of responses between the fire department of Rouse's Point and the fire department of Champlain?
Is that from our packet, Mr. Wright? Is that from the packet
I
that?
better go get it, because my packet's not up to date with your packet.
Okay.
Let me go get it.
Page 8.
I think, Mr. Wright, if you're referring to page 8 of the packet,
Page 9.
page 9. Well, I'm sorry, it looks like page 7, but upside down. That's a purely Champlain-based accounting. So that's where our fire department has gone.
My package is different.
Okay, so when you see that Rouse's Point made there were 22 responses, Rouse's Point, that means that our firemen went on mutual aid, or our EMS went on mutual aid to Rouse's Point 22 times. They are called in when Rouse's Point is elsewhere and unable to answer a call. Okay, so,
Seven?
Okay, do you have any facts or figures regarding the number of responses from Rouse's Point outside of the village versus Champlain outside of the village?
oh, here you go. Seven is upside down.
We did last year, Rodney, we were supposed to receive a response account from each of the villages. Somehow or another, I think we received it last year from everybody, but this year we have not received a response for 1999. Of course, 1999 is not over yet. But generally, we're a year behind on response. 98, this is 98 response. They're supposed to give it to, I think it's what, 4 times a year?
I think that's
We're
what it
supposed
says
to
in the
receive that
contract.
account 4 times a year, the response. And we haven't received it for 1999. But that 1998 is an active figure. They do in their computers at home or for the office ones.
They haven't been in on a talk, so they haven't given
You got
you
the information,
information.
huh?
That's why you're lacking information, because, you know, they, I'm sure, have it.
Let me
Well, we haven't
just,
received it from Champlain either, 99.
You won't until,
Well, we're supposed to receive it 4 times a
yeah,
year.
I'm afraid we've always been,
see, I handed, when I was chief, I handed it to you every month. But that was me.
let me see, I have Rouse's Point's information, but I don't, from back when we were doing the review, but I don't think
The
it's
village,
in there.
to the town, I give it to Ralph.
You got one for 97?
So I handed it every month.
For Rouse's Point,
Page 9.
Yeah,
9,
there's us, it's a Champlain.
that's Champlain.
It's all Champlain. She has to figure Champlain is given over the past 2 years.
Somewhere I've got Rouse's Point's responses for,
Jane?
I don't think I got it in this packet. So Rodney, you want to know what the Rouse's Point responses were?
I'm just wondering, they're getting $55,000, and has this been increased for
Rouse's Point is an increase. We paid Rouse's Point $40,000 last
So
year.
they demanded an increase of $15,000?
Yes, that seems to correspond with Champlain's request for last year. You have it, Jane? That's Rouse's Point. It's 1970. No, it's 98. 98. Rodney, for 1998, the Village of Rouse's Point's total calls were 429. Town calls were 142. Mutual aid calls were 38. I don't have a breakdown of ambulance and fire on that 142 for the town, but
So 429 was the village
429 were total calls for the Village of Rouse's Point.
total.
Of that total calls, 142 of them were town of Champlain protection area, 142. And their total mutual aid calls were 38. Well, we generally do a 50% when we do it on mutual aid. In other words, when we look at mutual aid, we generally do a 50% on it. So you could say that 50% of those 38 calls were to the town of Champlain. Mr. Bruce West?
There's something I don't understand. If a fire district is formed, and it states in here for the village and the town outside the village of Rouse's Point, how come we still have to give money to the village of Rouse's Point for fire protection?
Well, go ahead and answer.
Reason why you're paying for protection to the village of Rouse's Point is because, and I'm not that familiar with the geographic areas here, but maybe that portion of the town is better served because of response times by the village of Rouse's Point Fire Department versus having the village of Champlain Fire Department respond. That is one reason why I would suspect that there may be a difference, or why you would want to continue that relationship. That doesn't necessarily mean that it has to continue in the future, though, because if there is a board of fire commissioners appointed, just like the town board presently could decide, no, we're not going to contract with Rouse's Point anymore, we're going to put everything with Champlain. So the newly created joint fire district, if one is created, could make the same decision. They could say, no, we don't need the assistance from the village of Rouse's Point other than on mutual aid. We'll protect the whole area on our own.
If I could just jump in, and I'm going to need my firemen who really know a lot more about this than I do. I think that from what I understand from our fire department, with the number of volunteers we have and the size of the area we have to cover, they do not feel they can give effective protection to that half of the district. That in terms of being stretched too thin, it would, just like I think Rouse's Point has said, they didn't feel they could cover our half of the district. It would just stretch our resources too much in terms of manpower and ability to respond. And Albert, you could probably address that better than I can.
Yeah, because we've had long discussions about even volunteer services. Years ago, when the fire department, and I'm saying 20 years ago, 30 years ago, there was a waiting list for volunteer organizations. What we're finding today is there is no waiting list, and most departments I know of don't even have a full roster. So what they're saying in essence is, we want to protect what we can, but we don't really want to grab any more. We've had talks with our neighboring departments, and they have the same problem that we do. Manpower, volunteerism, it's hard to get somebody to come out and do something. A lot of people have got full-time jobs and jobs on the side, and to take on more burden is not what this should all be about. I think it's all set in one spot. Rouse's Point does a fine job with theirs. We do with ours. Moore, Shazy, everybody's pretty well situated. To actually go out and take another part of the town for protection, I think everybody would be hard-strapped to do that. As it is, every year things seem to dwindle and dwindle. I know we've asked for help, and it just isn't going to happen. Not here. The only way that would ever happen would be if you'd want to pay your fire department. Somebody would have a paid job where they would go to work. And we really hope that that doesn't happen, not in this small community. I don't know if I helped at all.
I think that's helpful. And we also have our fire chief, Woodrow Kissel, out in the audience. And Woody, I assume you were planning on making some comments. I don't know if you'd like to respond to the question about covering the entire district.
Calvert Laporte pretty much covered the whole thing with volunteers. And when I joined the fire department 16 years ago, it took me a year and a half to get in because there was a waiting list. Today, we're lucky to get 6 or 7 people on a call. EMS, sometimes it's even tougher. If we expand the territory, there's no way we can effectively protect the area, the whole township. We can cover our area, but we can't effectively cover the whole thing. That's why the continuation of the $55,000 to Rouse's Point would hopefully continue.
One last word, because I have another meeting to go to. My hat goes off to the firemen. I think they're the most dedicated organization that there is. And my only concern is that I hope this does not create that animosity between the new fire district and the village of Rouse's Point. I live a half a mile outside the village of Rouse's Point. I'm covered by Rouse's Point. So I want to have peace with them.
Well, Mr. Ray, let me just tell you, Arnie, of course, resides there. You look out at this group of gentlemen, and they've been watching me since I was about that high when I used to help my uncle do we were the dummies in the first aid class, and I would not be able to look these people in the eye. And maybe you could say that was it was typecasting, but anyway, we used to work in the EMS class with my uncle Leo Letourneau, and I would not be able to look these gentlemen in the eye, let alone the Rouse's Point board, if this turned out to be something to undercut the Rouse's Point Fire Department. I mean, they used to take in a lot of money in that 4th of July celebration, and I counted it all one year. So it would just be unacceptable, not to mention the fact that I spend a lot of time in Rouse's Point, and it would not be very good at 30 Pratt Street if that happened, so.
I might add to that, if you were to say, well, the new fire district would protect the whole district, you would increase the average calls just to the town area by the total would be 356 calls. So that's doubling the load on those, the fire station. You'd be working the men twice as hard. You know, can you do this with the limited force that you have? Ms. Moore?
Suzanne Moore, Press Republican. The tax rate that you're talking about, the estimated tax rate for the town outside residents, does that include in the budget the $55,000 for?
$1.08. It's between $1.08 and $1.09. That does include the $55,000. It brings it up to about $176,000 budget for the fire district, tentative budget.
So, my question to your attorney here, why, please explain how it balances out. If you're paying one tax rate on the outside, the people in the Rouse's Point Protection District would be paying, would they be paying the for the $55,000 plus what? How to explain that?
No, they would be paying the same rate. It would now be a town-wide rate of $1.08 or $1.09. I've not done the math, but they would pay the same rate for that fire protection district as the rest of the residents of the particular area.
But doesn't it appear that, math isn't my thing, but I've heard people comment that they feel that if they're in the Rouse's Point district, they should be paying a rate a tax rate for $55,000.
Could I respond to that? You know, Shan, that was a big question I had initially, and I wondered why they couldn't break it up, but apparently the law of the fire district, it's the same rate across the district. As it works out, you see, the assessed value on the Rouse's Point side is quite a bit lower than the Champlain side. If you were going to just take the Rouse's Point Protection District and assess a tax rate for $55,000, you would have to charge about $1.09 per thousand to do it. When you throw the $55,000 in with the assessment in the Village of Champlain and the Champlain District, it goes to about $1.08 per thousand. As I already said, it's in between, and these numbers are so large, a penny could swing a penny either way. So because the payment is $55,000, it works out, it would be the same rate anyway.
Yes? What Henry is relating to, that the article that was in the paper was a touch inadequate in that it stated the fire rate for the fire protection district now is $1.08 a thousand. Well, that's not true. The last year's rate was 71 cents a thousand, and the tentative is 84 cents a thousand for this year. And some people might be confused by that statement. So to set it straight, the town fire protection, which is what we have now, fire rate, on last year was 71 cents a thousand. For this year, the tentative budget shows it by $55,000 to Rouse's Point and $55,000 to Champlain, sets a rate of 84 cents a thousand. So, you know, it's not really $1.08 now. It's only 84, or the new budget will be 84 cents. And that protects the whole town fire protection district as it stands now. With the new rate in the district, still protecting the town, district, and the village of Champlain, will be set at $1.08 with a tentative budget that they have submitted to us based on $176,000.
Right.
The tentative budget for the fire district states they want $176,000 in their budget for the year 2000. That would give you a tax rate of $1.08, between $1.08 and $1.09 to support that. Now that has a $20,000 contingency fund, not a contingency, a capital reserve fund in that. So, and it also has the payment to Rouse's Point for fire protection for $55,000 to that particular area. We have one fire district, but we have two areas. And that second area is covered by Rouse's Point, and the other area is covered by Champlain, just like it was before. Is that clear? Yes, I have my attorney. He wants to say something. Speak up, Henry.
I just wanted to volunteer that part of the confusion is mine, because when I drew the legal notice, I drew it in such a way that it made it look as though the fire district was going to cover all of the area in the town of Champlain except for the village of Rouse's Point. And I think that that's what caused some of Ms. Moore's confusion. The mistake wasn't hers, it was mine. So that, as I say, the notice makes it look like the fire district is going to be everywhere but the village of Rouse's Point, and that's not true.
So it is. Everywhere but the village of Rouse's Point.
Well, now I'm confused then, because...
But the coverage would only be in this half of the district. The fire department would only cover the village and the current Champlain Town Fire District.
Total town.
Right, the new boundaries of the jointly formed fire district would be all of the town and the village of
No,
Champlain.
you really can't say all of town. You have to say all of town outside, which is in the
Outside
fire
district.
protection district now, and also encumber the village of Champlain,
Right,
will become part of the fire district.
right.
Difference between a district and a protection area. Protection area is run by the town, And that tax rate is set by the town. We contract with the villages to do the fire protection. A fire district is run by commissioners. We have nothing to say about the tax rate, nothing to say about the expenditures. That is set up by the commissioners. Now, these commissioners at first are appointed by the two boards or by the one board. In either way, it depends on which way you set it up. When they are appointed, they have to run for an election the following year. If this takes place currently, they would be in office for 1 year before they would have to go for elections. They hold their own elections. It's not like you would be a town election. They generally hold a, more or less, I call it an informal election, although it is legal. They do not have to have voting machines or anything like that. It's pretty informal. They do have the notifications that they have to give out. Candidates have a certain time to apply for commissioners. But it's run by the Board of Commissioners, not by the Village of Champlain, not by the Town of Champlain. Those people that you elect on the second term are representing you. And if you don't like what they're doing, you have the opportunity to vote them out the next election, just like you do us.
What happens when the fire districts, when the fire commissioners create their budget? Don't they have to present it to the town board?
It has to be presented to the budget officer of the town. He has no rights to modify that budget, change that budget, no. His only job is to submit it with the town clerk to the county clerk for taxes.
So if there's going to be an increase, there's never a public hearing or anything like that?
If I could just speak to that particular issue. Fire districts, unlike any other municipal entity, are subject to what is known as a spending limit. In other words, in statute, there is a specific amount of money above which they cannot spend without having a referendum to exceed that particular spending limit. And it's all found in the town law, Section 176. And the basic concept is, the basic premise is, it's $2,000 for the first million of assessed valuation in the area protected, and $1,000 for every million thereafter. $1,000 per million. $1,000 for every million of assessed valuation.
So it's about 1%.
So it's about 1%. Very good.
So if they want to go, they have to have a public or permissive referendum or
Mandatory.
voting? Where they-
Right, absolutely. Now, so as not to mislead you, there are certain items which are accepted from that spending limit, such as the cost of volunteer firemen's benefit law insurance. Whatever that premium is not included. Payments of debt reduction are not included. But those are maximums that the Board of Commissioners can spend in any 1 year. That does not necessarily mean that they're going to collect that amount or that they need to spend that amount. Just as the state of New York imposes this spending limit. Fire districts are the only municipal entity which has a spending limit. The town board, they make their decision, they have public hearings, and then they propose their budget. But it's not something which they have these limits built into statute. Only fire districts do.
I might add to what he has to say that, to be honestly and truthful about it, a taxpayer has more control over a board of commissioners than they do have over a village board or a town board in the aspect of when they do their budget. Because there's a few items that they have to go to public referendum in their budget, whereas a town or a village would have to just hold an informal public hearing on an expenditure that they wanted to make. In other words, if I had a fire department, I could go out and spend $250,000 for a new fire truck, and I wouldn't have to answer to you too much at all. But according for that Board of Commissioners to spend that $250,000, I believe he's subject to permissive referendum, which is a public vote. So if he wants to buy that fire truck, he has to get your permission first for a vote on spending that money for that fire department. Whereas a town would not have to, a village or a town would not have to go through that.
Could I ask a question? terms of the budget process, when we do our budgets, we advertise that we have a prepared budget ready, we
Correct.
hold a public hearing. Is that done for fire
Okay,
districts?
fire districts must submit their budgets to the town pursuant to statute by September 20th of each year. They typically, the Board of Fire Commissioners meet during the months of July and August, meet with the fire chief to listen to him as to what he feels he needs for the ensuing year. And then after that is all done, they develop their budget along with their treasurer. Treasurer makes them aware of what the spending limits are so that we can't exceed this. He tries to make them aware of what the VFBL coverage is, what the past experience tell them that the NIMO bill and the telephone are all going to cost. Once they develop their budget, by statute, they're required to submit it to the town by September 20th. The town then incorporates that within its budget when they send it down to the county for collection.
So there is no public hearing per se, but
No.
all those meetings are open to the public?
Absolutely.
as- Just like all
Yep.
our other boards?
Uh,
And advertised? and-
Absolutely. Fire districts are municipal corporations. They're subject to the Freedom of Information Law, the Open Meetings Law. They're subject to the General Municipal Law. If they decide that they want to build a new firehouse, there's a process that they have to go through. Anytime they want to borrow money, they have to come to you, the residents of the community, for the authority to borrow that money. If they have money which they've set aside in their reserve funds, and they want to spend the money from the reserve fund, they have to go through a permissive referendum. So there's a lot of checks and balances. Also, the Board of Fire Commissioners, just like any other municipal entity, are subject to review and audit by the New York State Comptroller's Office. And if there are inappropriate actions, the Attorney General's office gets involved. So there's a tremendous amount of oversight, but the most oversight comes from you, the residents of the community, to be involved in your community government as you are tonight.
Can I just follow up on that one, because I want to make sure I understand. So if, anytime they borrow, it's a mandatory referendum?
Absolutely.
Not like us, where people can request a referendum, but there has to be a vote. I didn't understand, that's an interesting point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anytime there is any borrowing, whether it be for $20,000 or $200,000, it is required that there be a mandatory referendum, because you're pledging the full faith and taxing credit of the residents of that particular community for the payment of the bond. Often what they will do is, if it's a relatively small amount, they enter into what is known as a bond anticipation note with maybe a local lender, and they're usually paid out over, at max, 5 years. If it's a bigger expenditure and it's one that you're going to spread out over time, then you would typically go through what is known as a serial bond, and that's paid over a longer period of time, 10 or 15 years.
And even that capital reserve that's set up has to be mandatory.
Correct.
So in other words, if they build a contingency fund for $80,000, before they can spend any money out of the contingency fund, they have to go to referendum to vote.
There's a publication which I don't see a copy of here tonight, but it does exist, and it's called Financial Information for Fire District Officials. It's a big book, big yellow book, and that's kind of the Bible for the Board of Fire Commissioners. That's something that they have to live by, in addition to all of the other statutes in the state that apply to municipalities.
Barb Jarvis is your name?
If these commissioners come up with their own budget, they submit it to only the town, why do they submit only to the town when it's a joint
Because,
district?
if I may respond to that, is because it is incumbent upon the town to collect the tax for them.
They have a different tax year than our village. See, the tax year for the village is June to May. Ours is from January to December. That is the time that the Fire Commission has to submit their budget, is for their year, January to December. Give your name.
John Annette, I'm from Rouse's Point. I got a couple questions. First of all, you talked about the coverage for the district that Rouse's Point now has. My question is, what if Rouse's Point tells you to stuff it? And they can do that. What are you gonna do then?
Well, in that case, I quit the job, I go to Florida. Now, in that case, you would go to Shazy and ask Shazy if they'd want to protect it. You could go to Moore's and ask them if they wanted to protect it.
It's a feasible question.
Yeah.
Okay, they can tell you, we don't want to play anymore. Okay?
Possible.
And you don't have the coverage now.
I have it now.
Admittedly, you do not have the coverage to take over that area for fire protection.
I mean, if Rouse's Point.
If Rouse's Point, if you went to your fire district and Rouse's Point says, I don't want to play, I only have to cover the village of Rouse's Point, and that's what they, technically, that's all they have to cover, is that village, you're stuck. What do you do to cover that area?
Well, as I related to you before I went to Florida, you would go to Shazy and say to Shazy, would you be willing to protect this area of the town fire
You're talking
district?
response time now, okay? Shazy's response time is going to be a lot more. Now you're talking people's insurance going up.
I don't know.
Fire insurance will go up.
George seems to have his hand up there flying with you. This is, you know, it's an informal public hearing, so don't feel bad. Come on, George.
First of all, that would never happen, John.
I
You
know,
know it as well as I do. First of all, we'd be out, Ross's Point would be out of mutual aid. We'd be god darn fools, Steve, to consider
well, I'm
that.
not saying that, but it's,
No, we'd be
Yeah.
idiots. Nobody
well,
would be
there
coming
are
into
some
Ross's
idiots in the
Point.
world, George, you know that, and I know that.
Just point you to the board only.
We would be,
Okay, sorry.
it's not even lucrative, because we'd
Okay.
be totally out of mutual aid. There would be nobody answering any calls. We'd have to give up our radio system, which is under the county mutual aid system.
Yeah, I'm gonna miss
So we do have some security there.
You have security.
Thank you, Mayor.
But I
It may
think,
cost you more,
just-
but you'll have security.
I think the point that
John,
you're making is that
Yeah.
it would,
If for
protect-
some reason.
the protection would suffer. There's nothing
Yes.
as good as
Right.
Rouse's Point protecting that, just like there's nothing as good for this side of the town as the village of Champlain protecting it. I think that that's something that you aren't going to find any argument here
One
on.
thing I want to mention that probably everybody should be aware of is the thing that was in the paper about the computer information this morning. I think people would be able to make a little better assessment of the whole thing had they known before this time, before today.
That's my fault, that I should have had
Yeah.
that first story.
Whatever.
And I was just-
I have a question for Mr. Young. 12 questions were issued to you.
Oh, yeah.
My question to you is, for several of these questions, you continually say, why do you want to do this? Why do you want to do this? Why the questions? What led you to believe that this is probably not the right thing to do by the responses that you have on here?
Actually, what I was suggesting, the issues that I had an issue with was the village cutting loose their fire department. And what I was saying is, why would you want to do that? Then the fire department becomes independent. Now they're going back to, actually, to me, it's a step backwards. Because now they're at the position where they have to go out and do their own fundraising. They're going to have to run their own bake sales or whatever to generate the money to provide the firefighters with the equipment, apparatus, protective gear that they need, the training. With a municipal corporation, a joint fire district, and that was my perspective. I was coming at it from the concept that probably for this particular situation, a joint fire district was something that should be explored, not necessarily endorsed, but something that should be explored. The reason being that the Board of Commissioners would then, their whole focus and only reason for being would be fire protection in this area. They could spend all of their time working on that. The budget that would be developed would be specific to fire protection. You don't have, some places you have a problem with the money that comes in for fire protection from serving outside the village goes for other purposes and not for the fire department. So this would really focus all of the money that's being collected for fire protection would actually go for the fire protection. So that was my reason. I mean, we lose members. The gentleman over here is referring to loss of membership. Back in the early 1960s, we had 140,000 volunteers in the state of New York. By the mid-1980s, we were down to about 104,000. We were getting smaller all the time. We passed some legislation then relative to the Service Awards Program, which is an incentive, a financial incentive to the firefighters. So that was one thing that we did. And there were other things that are being done or attempted to be done. But the reason was firefighters were saying, gee, I spend half my time trying to raise the money to buy the equipment and to buy the apparatus. I don't want to do that anymore. I want to be a firefighter. I'm willing to spend my time, but I'm not going to go to door to door. I'm not going to stand out in the middle of Route 9 and 11 at the intersection, with a boot, trying to collect a buck or two. So this mechanism allows for a board of commissioners now to be responsible and to collect the tax base across the whole town.
Okay, the next question I'm going to have to you is, being the expert that you are in this.
Oh, no, don't never call me an expert. Attorneys get in trouble.
Yeah. What other alternatives do the village and town have, other than the district, other than the fire district? I mean, you can dissolve the village and come up with the same result.
That would be one.
What other alternatives do they have?
They can continue to do it as they're doing presently, with the village providing the fire protection within the area, continuing to contract with the portion of the town outside of the village. Those are the primary alternatives. I mean, continue to do what you're doing, go to a joint fire district, or as you say, dissolve the village. I don't know that would be something that would be amenable to the residents of the village.
Okay, that's it for now.
Mr. Richard Lyon?
Mr. Warren, town of Champlain. You just brought up a good thing, it looks like a good point to me, dissolving the village. Now, you're talking by making this joint fire district, saving 12 cents. Now, if you dissolve the village, how much would you save in your taxes? Has that been studied? The town of Moore saved 20% in their village. Now, that's more than 12 cents.
My understanding, and I have a difficult time because of the different way we tax. Once you take the fire protection differential out of the village and the town outside, we'd end up with pretty close tax rates. If we get rid of the fire protection section of our tax, it's going to look very much like the town outside portion. So from a financial point of view, my understanding is there wouldn't be much of a savings. Plus, I think you have the people of the village who might have something to say about that. I think they see some pretty valuable services that we provide in other areas.
Sure, what you're going to save by forming this fire district, you can spend somewhere else and still keep your taxes at the same rate. You're not going to gain anything. The people in the village are going to gain anything.
Well, I think they will. I think first of all, they're going to have a tax rate that is a bit lower. They're going to have a much better equipped and prepared department, because by sharing the cost equally across the town outside of Rouse's Point and the village, there's more money available to prepare for equipment purchases and training that's needed. So I think they do benefit.
Well, the reason they're not getting the equipment is because whoever's controlling their budget is not letting them get their money.
I bought a $46,000 truck last year. I don't know. I guess you'd have to talk to the fire department about that. If you want to look at our.
They don't control their budget. You do.
Absolutely, but I think if
When you came here about a year ago, you came down pretty hard on the town, and really the town has no input in that budget.
If I could just respond to this, I think that. This has been I don't know how, it's like trying not to mention the elephant in the living room. I don't want to cast blame. I don't think the town is any more responsible for the situation than the village is. I mean, the village could have asked for more money a long time ago. There was a big change in where the assessed value is in this town. And what we're doing, I think, is catching up to that. I really do. In terms of, I think, our spending, Dick, I don't know if your point is that we don't spend enough on our fire department. I think you might be surprised if you look at what we spend versus what Rouse's Point spends. we come darn close, and we have a third of the assessed value that they do. So I don't think that you're going to find that, that there's a huge difference in that. But that extra 10 or 20,000 a year is that 10 or 20,000 that lets you prepare for the future, as opposed to just meeting, what today's costs. So I'm sorry, Mr. Young.
Okay. The only point I wanted to make, and actually was supporting what you had just said, at this point, the town, the outside town, its only involvement in the fire district budget and spending is to pay $55,000. They don't have any control over, going for reserve accounts or apparatus or hose or whatever. You turn the check is written out, and correct me if I'm incorrect, the town writes the check to the village, doesn't write it to the fire department.
To the village.
To the village,
Champlain
and then
Fire
the
Department.
village puts it into its general fund
Right.
and supports its services. With this newly created, if you decide, joint fire district, the money would then be paid to the Board of Fire Commissioners, and it would only be for purposes of fire protection. There are very specific things which the Board of Fire Commissioners can spend the money on, and they're all, again, enumerated in statute. I mean, they can't pay for the maintenance of a private road because that, they need to get there. That's not an allowable expense. It's all enumerated as to what they can spend it for and what they can't. Most of the things are for apparatus, firehouse, training, drills, equipment, responses. Those are the things that they can pay for.
And now, if I could just, now that I have my dander down about you proposing to dissolve the village, let me just respond to what would happen. If we did dissolve the village, Dick, do you know what we would have to provide fire protection? We would have to have a town fire district, because you no longer would have the Champlain Fire Department. But the only way a town can have a fire department is to...
Have you ever made a study of that?
Have I informally...
You're the only one that can call for that study, the mayor.
Yeah, and I think probably the residents should let me know that that's what they want, if that's what they're interested in. I've never had someone in the village propose that to me. Had several people outside, but I've never had anyone in the village come and propose that.
There are some people in the village that's mentioned it to me.
Well, they should, but let's forget that issue. If you did, and Mr. Young can correct me if I'm wrong, the town had, our initial proposal was a town fire department, which is not legal under New York State town law. So should the village of Champlain dissolve in the future, let's say the residents all come knocking on my door and tell me, let's dissolve the village, let's do a study, we save thousands of dollars, which I don't think is the case, but let's say we did it. You would need a new organization for the fire department in this town. And is there any other option for the town?
The town could continue to provide the fire protection as they do presently, which is a contract with outside agencies.
But-
Or you could even, and this has been done unsuccessfully once down the village of Rybrook, where they hired a proprietary fire department. In other words, a company, Rural Metro is the name of the company, and they were hired to provide fire service to the residents of that particular community. It was a disaster, and it's since been ended, and they're back to using the volunteers.
It's my understanding, as long as you are a town with a village, you cannot have a fire district.
A joint, well, I'm not sure I understand the question.
Fire department.
Fire department. No, right.
As long as you have
Yep.
one village
Yep.
in that town,
Yep.
you can't have a fire. But you can have a fire district. I might add,
Right? That money, the 55,000 goes to the general budget? And then, does that mean that money could be spent for something else besides the fire department? That's the way I understood it.
Dick, why don't you take a look at a couple different pages, let's have you look at. Let's start off with page 6, which shows you our fire and EMS spending and property taxes. And it's a difficult situation because we do run our budgets differently than the town. The town fire protection, it's a special district. It has a special line item. It's a clear, this year I guess you're looking at a $110,000 shot, and it goes on a special levy. Villages don't budget that way. We run water, sewer, and general. So if you take a look at, let's look at last year, because this year's just a projected budget. But let's look at last year. So we're on page 6. We're looking at budget year 1998-99. we spent $92,030 on fire and EMS spending. Now, to see where that is, you take a look at page 4, and it is broken down to you exactly where that money went. The accounts, the special accounts that are exclusively fire, ambulance, what we spent to repair the siding and the windows at the fire station building, what we spent on electricity and natural gas, fuel, gasoline, our bonding on the ambulance, fire station, and one truck, the insurance we paid, broken all down by station liability auto coverage. That's what we spent on fire protection. Not counting copies, not counting clerical time, not counting those things that also go out of the office. So there's no breakdown on anything like that. Now, so that's what was spent. So if you go back to page 6, last year in that budget year, 98-99, the town gave us $40,000. Did that go into the general fund? Absolutely. We have no other place to put it. It would be most inappropriate to put it into water or sewer. We spend all our fire money out of the general fund. So that's where it has to go. But if you look, the town gave us $40,000. We spent $92,000. We spent all the $40,000. Plus we spent $52,000 of village funds, right? I mean, we've had this discussion at many a meeting. I don't know how else to do that math. So when you figure we spent $52,000 and you look at our total tax rate, the Village of Champlain residents paid about $1.55 per thousand out of their $5.99. Okay?
I think we have another gentleman in the back that see.
Just to point out, Jarvis, Champlain. Something else that Missy, on the spending of like $40,000, there's $52.50 of that. It comes right off the check. It comes to Niagara Hose for personal services. And it could be worse than that. We take 15% of it. We could take 35% of it if we wished. So it would leave less money for the village. We'd have to pay more.
Yeah, but may I add, you don't put that into a sock. You spend it, don't you?
Well, we spend it on equipment.
I didn't want to think somebody in the public thinks you put it in a sock and put it away forever.
Right. So, could I just get back? 'Cause I need some
Let's
information.
go to the public
Nope,
more.
but, okay, I'll follow up
This is
after.
what it's supposed to be.
I'll follow up after.
Mr. Castine, I guess now.
Calvin Castine, Champlain. Am I correct on my math, Mr. Young? You said $2,000 per first million, $1,000 for the rest of the million?
Correct.
So on $163 million, the total would be $164 million total?
Correct, yeah,
The Champlain Fire District proposed budget is $176.
right. There are certain things that are exempted that I mentioned, such as the cost of BFBL insurance. I think that alone was about $8,000 or $9,000.
What is that, Mr. Young? Workman's
Oh,
comp?
workers' comp.
Okay, yeah, that's $13,000.
$13,000. So that would be $13,000 on top of that $164.
So it's added to it, it's not
Yeah,
a...
right, exactly.
So we're maxed out already with this proposal, then, right?
No, not really.
No, because there are other items too.
There are other items.
Yeah.
I have a
This
budget.
is like dealing with
form.
the school budget where everything is mandated.
Well,
Tell me what's mandated here
but
so
I
we can
think-
know what the maximum would be.
What is
It's-
mandated?
It's very tough to say
Mhm.
the maximum is 164,000, but we got
You're right.
100,000 mandates in there, that's 264,000. Tell
Right.
me the
Okay,
mandates.
but the mandates are your volunteer
I don't have
firemen.
dollars, not what they are, what
Okay.
the dollars are. I don't care what they are, because that doesn't tell me anything.
Well,
I need to know
if
what
I
the
tell
dollars
you what
would be.
they are, maybe the mayor or the supervisor could fill in what that amount costs.
I'm not, what you mean mandated spending
No,
that
no.
has to be spent?
He said there are mandates in there besides the maximum you can spend. maximum the fire district can put up is 164,000,
Correct.
plus the mandates.
Right.
If there's $100,000 of mandates in there, that's
I see what you're saying,
264, so
Cal.
that's,
I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
people
okay.
need to know what those mandates are. How much
Absolutely.
dollar-wise, not what they are physically, but dollar-wise.
I think first off, even though there is a spending limit, that's the max that they can go to, is 164,000.
Plus.
That doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to go to 164,000, because what they're going to do is actually start the process from the other side. They're going to say, what are our mandates? Good question. One of our mandates is to provide workers' comp or volunteer firemen's benefit law insurance. That costs $13,000. Write down $13,000. Okay, what else?
You got your liability, your bond liability.
Yep.
You've
Where'd
got
you
your
get the
vehicle
13?
insurance.
What?
Where's the 13 come from? Where's the 13,000 come from?
That's what we spent last year, a bit.
Workman's comp,
Okay.
Okay, the liability on vehicles.
$160.
How much?
No, that's liability, bond and liability, I think, isn't it?
Uh,
Vehicle
yeah.
coverage is $7,500. It's insurance on your vehicles.
That's in addition to,
Fire insurance on the fire station, $660. You got a total of $21,320 that is exempt from that amount, that I know about.
All the insurance is exempt.
Those are the only insurances that are exempt. And your debt service. Now, in addition, debt service. Good. What was the cost
Whatever
of your
your-
debt service?
Is it the interest or the,
Total debt service.
33,650.
$33,650.
33,650?
that's $55,000 extra right there.
Right. Now, but what I said is that you're taking the premise that we start off at 164 and we add all of this on top. The Board of Fire Commissioners, when they start their meetings in July and August, they work it in the reverse. You say, okay, these are the items, just as the board does. And
No, I would hope they wouldn't say, how much can we spend, and let's spend it all. But people need to know what they can
In
spend.
theory, yes, absolutely correct.
Just do those figures give you a maximum budget of $218,970.
Compared to the proposed of 177,000.
Right.
And
So
if I
that's
could-
another $41,000.
And if I could just interject here, we could form a fire district for a budget of $156,920 with no
Capital reserve.
no capital reserve, which drops your tax rate down 12 cents, 96 cents per thousand. You could do that.
No, that's not my point.
No, but I just-
I'm not concerned about the 176, I'm concerned about the 218.
Right.
Because I hate to give anybody a blank check.
Right.
It's my name on it.
But that's really important, that this is a proposal. This is something that we just came up with based upon what we had done in the past, plus our idea of putting it away. So
That-
can change, as you said, Calvin.
Yeah, but I'm not, this proposal doesn't really mean anything. I wanted the 218,000. Now, the proposal is important because we know what our assessment is based on 176,000. So I would hope that if the town did get into a fire district, that these people would be elected and not just appointed every year.
I think that's, well, I don't
I
want
don't
to
think
steal
anybody
it.
wants.
I don't want, myself personally, I would not want to appoint year after year.
Oh, you want to elect.
Because I would rather have it elected. Let it be your decision. I mean, there are decisions that town boards make, and nobody ever complains about them, and they think they're great decisions. Village board makes, and they think they're great decisions. But a lot of the people don't like it, but they never say anything. And I think that just like they elect me, they should elect those board of commissioners. So that's my intention. I don't know about the rest of the board.
If I could just follow up on that for 1 second. Relative to the election, you have a board of five fire commissioners. After the initial appointment, one of those commissioners will be elected every year. They serve for a 5-year term. So if you're unhappy with what your board is doing in a relatively short period of time, in the space of 3 years, you can totally turn over that board.
Now, when did the staggered terms start? Now, the 2.5, do they get elected for 1 year, 2 years, they run for a 2-year term, a 3-year term?
Yeah.
That first year, you get 5 different races?
No. Well, you have,
You
the
got
way
a
it
1-year
works
race,
is on the
2-year
first
race.
election, the highest vote getter gets the highest term. The second highest vote getter gets the second highest term, all the way down to the lowest vote getter gets the lowest term. and you stagger those at that point. I have a new one, John, I'll get to you.
Okay.
When I get done with you.
No problem.
George Cookman, Phone Affair. I see we got $150,189 debt. Who's paying for that? The town or the village, the fire commissioners?
The
Collective.
debt right now is paid by the village. If you form a fire commission and you accept the terms of the turnover of equipment versus asset versus debt, then you, as a commission, would be responsible for the debt and also be the owner of the assets.
I didn't have anything to say about the debt, but I'm asked to pay for the debt, though.
That's a negotiable item before the district is formed. You can either say, no, we don't want your assets, but we'll take the fire department.
What is the assets? We don't know what the assets compared to the debt is.
The village is doing a professional,
Yeah, we are doing an actual appraisal. It's taking us some time to get the gentleman to come. If you look, George, at page 10, this is an old appraisal.
I read that, yes.
Okay, and at that point, we were looking at about $800,000 in terms of what we had. Now, this is in-house. This is not done independently. We want to have it done independently. But I don't think there's much doubt that what we would be turning over would be value, fair market value, well above $150,000. We just purchased a truck for 46. We got the building and the ambulance alone, I think, would put us well over the 150.
The proposed budget you have is it says debt of, $33,650. Is that included in that debt there? To pay back? Are we gonna pay it all at one time or pay it off in installment plans? There's something else we have to know.
I think that
well, that's, once the Board of Commissioners is established, they will be the ones to determine that. If they want to tax you the next tax year to pay off that total debt,
Then taxpayer would go up more than 188 cents a thousand. They go up to $2 a thousand if they want to pay it off right away. So actually, it's just $108 a thousand. Just like she said, the school. When the school up here was built, our taxes weren't going to go up. We're going to save all kinds of money because all schools are going to combine. Now, when this comes together, we're going to save money. But I ain't seen them saving the money yet. Everything goes up.
I don't think anybody said here that, at least, I hope we didn't say there was going to be any savings in terms of what we're spending. We're proposing to spend more. What I understand about the debt, George, is that the debt is currently in the name of the Village of Champlain. So what the fire district would have to do is take out a new loan to pay off that debt, and then they would set the repayment terms. One thing you should consider is apparently there is a good interest rate that beats ours. So actually, the debt service should be lower. I believe I've been told 2% in consolidating, is that?
No, that's not actually true.
Oh, dear.
There is what they call a revolving loan fund, which the state set up about 5 years ago, which allows municipalities, primarily fire districts until this year, now independent fire companies can also, borrow money from the state for the acquisition of apparatus, firehouses, etc. But there are all kinds of limits in there, and I'm not sure that in this particular case it would apply.
It won't apply.
Yeah.
It's got to be new.
Okay. So I'm sorry, I have misinformation on that. I believe we're 6%. Janice, we could get you the figures in terms of the interest we're paying on the debt service, how much the interest is.
There are several bonds, so it would vary.
Okay,
Typically, a fire district can borrow the money at the same rate.
6, 5,
If you borrow a bond anticipation note, which is a note that's returnable or it comes up every year, so a lower rate. If you get into a serial bond, which is paid back over 5 to 10 years, it's going to be a higher rate. What is that rate? I represent a lot of fire districts down in the Albany area, and I typically can borrow money at about 4.25%.
And we're at 6, 5, and 5.875 for our existing debt. That's what we're paying now.
Are your debts over 10 years or what?
Very just based upon the bond. We have one of the fire station bonds is paid off in 2005. Both of them are 2005, and the fire truck is 2006.
If you were borrowing $150,000 for 5 years at 5.5%, over that period of time, you'd be paying $70,611, which is almost half in 15 years.
Well, I think we all know that, and I think my way of thinking is it's good managed to have a capital reserve fund. And, you may pay a little bit more up front, but in the long run, you're going to save a lot of money. And as we all know, interest eats you up.
I got another question. There's a group of us on the south end that lives close to Shazy, and our rate's going to go up 37 cents, but the fire truck is not going to get there any quicker. Why can't we have a contract with there where they can respond in half the time?
Well, that's another alternative that's out there, is that the fire district can contract any way they want. They do have the district drawn up, and the district is spaced off in 2 areas, but they can have that, I understand they can have it respaced and contract with a third party for that district. That's just what I understand.
Then you're proposing to spend more money, which you're trying to save.
Yeah, but we want to get the fire truck there quicker.
Well, this is why
They're
this is
gonna
the reason why we're here.
From Champlain?
From
Automatic mutual aid.
Any fire in this district, around this
No,
district area.
automatic mutual aid.
goes Automatic.
If you have a fire call, if we have a fire call, let's say in Cooperville, Shazy is toned out at the same time Ross's Point is. There's a good chance they're gonna beat us there. Well, I know that's what it said. That's why we set it up, so that every corner in this county has got coverage as quick as possible.
Same thing with the ambulance?
Same thing with it, but the ambulance, no, the ambulance don't do that. We can, and they are been working on that.
Because I'd rather have the ambulance first.
Your house is burning, you want the ambulance
Well,
first?
if you get out of the house, you can replace the house.
Okay, gentlemen, I'd like to return the question and answer process, to the board. I know it's informal, but I find that it doesn't work very good when we talk amongst each other. But, good point. John, I think you had your hand up.
No, George asked that question.
I'm sorry, John, Ken got ahead of you.
That's all right, because George already asked the question.
Okay, all right. Ken?
I just wanted to talk a few minutes about the ambulance district. I know that this public hearing is for a fire district, but I think the people are not being told all of the facts. If you were to form a separate ambulance district with a separate fire district, you have the ability then to charge. You could recover from $50,000 to $75,000 a year, therefore saving your taxpayers a lot of money.
Well, has anybody ever done a business plan study on that, Ken?
A third of the volunteers now are charging for their service. And the reason they're doing that is because the volunteerism has dropped. It has already dropped so much in Clinton County that Keysville and Crew contract with CBPH, and believe me, for every call that they make, there's a charge. Morrisonville also has a paid person on their staff, and this is what is happening. They're saying preparing for the future. Volunteerism, unfortunately, is dying. It takes 3 years to get to be a level 600 tech. Everybody expects the absolute best when they call for the ambulance now. And the reason for that is we've all watched TV probably too much. And you all expect that. Well, Champlain right now has probably the best staffed volunteer ambulance in Clinton County with our expertise. And we're lucky to have that, and we're proud of it. But the trend now is to go towards charging. You're saying preparing for the future, and what this all comes down to is money. And people don't want to pay anymore. Here's a chance to save the taxpayer a little bit of money, but yet I haven't heard any consideration of this whatsoever. You're trying to brush it under the rug because you're afraid to charge. I firmly believe that people that call the ambulance, most of them have insurance, and the insurance will pay for it. Those that have Medicare and Medicaid, it will be paid for on a reduced rate. A little bit is better than nothing. And those that don't have any insurance can't pay and will not be refused.
Could I just, because I think I know George wants to do that, we need to make sure we separate a couple of issues. If we ever had to contract for paid EMS responders, we could charge in a fire district. If we have to pay for it, we can charge.
No, you can't.
Mr. Young?
209B of the General Municipal Law, subparagraph 4, provides that a fire district may create an ambulance squad within the fire department. If it's manned by volunteers, cannot charge for it.
But if you must contract
Well,
to pay for it,
well,
you can charge.
There is no authority for a fire district to enter into a contract to provide emergency medical services.
But the
Well, there are
town,
ways around that.
the town
because
could.
Eastville and Crew are doing it now through Mountain Lakes, of which I'm chairman of, okay? That's the way they're getting around it, and that's how they're doing it. So there's always a way around it, but the only way that we can charge is to set up a separate ambulance district. Exactly the same as the fire district, exactly the same taxing arrangement. You have 5 more people that you have to elect or appoint, and that's a drawback. I can see the town does not want to give up that authority, and rightfully so. They get paid, what, probably about 5 cents an hour or something? For their service.
This week it's a little less. You know, Ken, one question I have to you about that is if, let's say we did do an ambulance district in the town, but a Rouse's Point ambulance picked up, you know, Champlain couldn't make the call, and a Rouse's Point ambulance came over and picked them up, and they didn't get charged. Do you think that would cause a lot of problem with some of the people in the area? In other words, Rouse's Point ambulance answers a call in the town district, but did not bill them for that service. In other words,
If Ross Point came into Champlain and took one of our calls and they didn't bill, that's fine. That's what mutual aid's all about.
and
I
my
mean, when it
my
bothers
second
Ross
part to the
Point, you have to ask
question
them.
is, I know that you're going to charge out there, and you're gonna have a billing agency do the charging.
That's right.
They're gonna charge you for those services. How much of that money do they actually collect? Has anybody ever done a study on that? Have you gone to other ambulance districts to see how much they have really collected on a charge service through a billing agency? The billing agency, I understand, is paid up front.
They get paid on.
They get paid approximately 15% up front.
On a commission basis,
Yeah.
mostly.
So you send a bill for $100, they get 15,
That's right.
they bill it and they never get paid. So that's costing $15.
That's right.
But if they send the bill and they collect, well, naturally, he's made money. But what I'm saying is, how many of these,
They get paid.
huh?
The majority of the times they get paid. The
Well-
majority of the times when you charge somebody, you get paid because most of the people have insurance or they have Medicaid, Medicare.
Well,
They can't call Ross's Point if they live in the Champlain district.
I know once they call 911,
Because
it'll
Ross's
be,
Point can't really respond.
what I'd like to also say is, in talking with the lawyer that you informed me to call, I called him and talked to him about that for quite a while, and he was asking me how many calls that we do in the town of Champlain from the Champlain district, and I explained to him, I gave him over the figure, actually. And I gave him 100 and,
Ambulance calls so far up this year,
I think we're
248
I
as
gave
right now.
253.
Going out on 249.
I gave him 253. And he was explaining to me that, you know, the profitable venture in this is between 500 and 700 calls. He says, when you get into that many calls, he said,
To make a profit. We're not saying we're gonna make a profit, we're saying we're trying to save the
Well, he didn't-
taxpayers
I
$50,000 to
phrased that wrong.
$75,000 a year.
To
We're
make
not
it
trying to make a
worthwhile.
profit. We're trying to save the taxpayer a little bit of money.
well,
Nobody's in business to make money over this, believe me. We're trying to save the taxpayers some money.
well, I phrased that wrong. I'd like to correct my statement, not to make money, but to make it so that it's operational for the cost. I mean, it only supplements It does not provide the full. Yeah.
You're right, I'm not saying you pay
But
the
is
whole
what
thing.
you're going to make off of that, off of those 253 calls, I would imagine the calls would go down because that you so stated that, you know, you get some calls that are unnecessary. That would go down, and that would be better for the volunteer.
Nothing wrong with doing that. But if you make $50,000 a year, if you can save the taxpayer $50,000 a year, and that's very, very conservative.
Well,
I think that's a lot of
I think
money.
another point, see, I think, you know, somebody should do a business study on it to see what would the budget,
There's a lot of business studies been done.
what would the,
This is happening because of necessity.
have you got one that's been done?
No, I do not have one. I do not have one. And I think you're trying to downplay this.
No, no, I'm just.
Because you have to really study it yourself, and you're saying I should study it.
No, I don't think I'm claiming that.
I think George has something he wants to say in the back.
George?
Just to answer Kenny's concerns, this is Morrisonville, Schuyler Falls Volunteer Ambulance Service. They're the only independent, separate ambulance service in Clinton County. Their budget this year is $137,197. That's just for 2 ambulances. Now, they recruit, the town of Plattsburgh recruits the money. It doesn't go to them. They recruit about $50,000 to $60,000 a year on billing. But the town of Plattsburgh is doing the billing through a billing agency. The money goes to the town and not to, because I checked with these people. It's a proven fact that a separate district for ambulances costs the taxpayers more money.
But doesn't the city of Plattsburgh, the town of Plattsburgh?
But not the city, it
contract with
doesn't.
CVPH for their
Oh,
service?
the
And
city
CVH
has-
bills?
I mean, I'm just looking at this, and I mean, I wasn't involved with it. I know when it started. They asked me my opinion when they started it. I told them that it should go in the Morrisonville Fire District because you're going to save money. I'll give you an example. This is their budget. Insurance, $32,000. They have malpractice insurance, they have insurance on their vehicles, insurance on their station. That's total insurance. That's another cost that when it's in the fire district, you do not have.
That's $10,000 more than we pay for the entire Champlain Fire Department.
I'm just telling you, that is their budget. So if you want to go separate district, that's fine. I mean, it's got nothing to do with us. But everybody's interested in dollars and cents here. Here's some
Well,
figures.
you know, it's an open meeting and everybody can bring up their ideas, and I think, you know, this is what we're doing here.
Well, I just wonder why the trend is towards ambulance districts and towards charging. There's a reason for that. And I've told you, it's because volunteers have been down. And when you're forced to contract with either CVPH or to hire people, then you will be looking at charging. Believe me.
And that,
You will have to charge.
I think everyone agrees with that, but I'm not sure I see the connection, Ken. Well, I think, you know, this is interesting, you brought this up at our last meeting. I think good people, looking at all the facts, can come to a different conclusion on this. There are people, perhaps they're out here in the audience, maybe they're not, who do not think that charging is good for the community, for the fire department, for the situation. They have, I know they have spoken to me, now maybe they haven't spoken to you. I don't think they're saying that when we have to, we shouldn't, but they're saying if we don't have to, and there are risks involved, and you would have to agree there are risks that someone might not call an ambulance.
You see. Just to answer your
That's
question on
everybody's
charging.
opinion as to whether they want to call an ambulance or not.
But
I can't really foresee anybody in the right mind being sick enough to think they're going to pass away or die and not want to call an ambulance.
Okay, if I'm not mistaken, doesn't this request generally come from the fire department and the ambulance department to do this?
I'm sorry.
In other words, to form an ambulance district, isn't this an agreement between the fire department and the fire EMS, the ambulance service? So are they the ones that petition the
The
town?
fire district is established, if that's what you're asking.
Who petitions the town to do it?
Who petitions? I don't know, the same people are petitioning now, except that the village doesn't want to face that fact. The only reason the village is petitioning for a town fire district is because they do not have the money to do it on their own. And it should be equally spread, just like Melissa has said. The tax evaluation or assessment has gone up outside the village enough so that it should be spread outside the town, into the town. That's a fact. Can't deny that. And that's where it should be. And if you want to maintain the fire department, the ambulance, as it is now, a viable, valuable asset, you have to give them the money to operate with. We've talked about
I think we all
budgets.
realize
But
that.
right now, if OSHA came in to Champlain, we would be forced to spend probably, I'm gonna guess, $30,000 just to update to be OSHA, under OSHA. And there are very few fire departments, small fire departments that pass OSHA.
How does OSHA miss you, Ken? They inspect us every year. I believe they do.
Well, they don't inspect all the equipment and all the Scott air tanks and all that stuff.
We're making pretty strong statements
Arnie?
here.
Just quickly, probably put this to bed. There's a bill in the legislators right now, and has been for several years, to allow fire districts and villages to charge. What has to happen, irregardless, is these firefighters and the EMS people have got to write their letters to their assemblymen and their senators, and say we want it.
Yes.
And if you don't, you're never gonna see it.
Conference of Town passed a resolution in support of that at the last general session.
House Bill 1186,
We
right
did
now,
it
$1
last year.
billion for the next 5 years. Would you believe there's people in the fire service opposed to it? $1 billion of grants from the federal government, finally, for fire and EMS, and people in the fire service opposed to it.
It's strange how, we have to operate in government, because of other governments won't give us the authority to do what, should be done. And what Ken's saying is logical. He answers a lot of calls, and I'm sure Rouse's Point does, to non-citizens of the area, but yet they have to pay for that ambulance service. And what he's saying is very true. Why aren't they billed? Because they don't pay a tax in this area to support that ambulance service. But yet there's no way we can collect. I think that something should be changed, and probably you should contact your senators and your congressmen.
Just to follow up on that, I do the lobbying for the state association, and that's exactly for fire districts, right? And that's exactly what has to be done, is you have to write to your senators, your assemblymen, and tell them that you want them to support the bill which would amend Section 209B of the General Municipal Law so as to authorize fire departments to also bill for the services. Well, it would be the district that would bill.
I think you better clarify that. The EMS services.
Yes, I'm sorry, yeah, only for, and I was directing my question to Ken, or my response to Ken. I'm only dealing with EMS services. Presently, there is no authority, you can't bill for your volunteer services. For fire calls, we're not going to start charging, I can assure you of that right now. The only thing would be possibly on EMS services, and then only because most people have insurance, which would pay for those particular services. Where you will run into a little bit of a rub is, what do you do when the person doesn't have insurance? Obviously, you're going to respond. And that's what they commonly refer to, these people who bill for you. They call it soft billing. We'll send you the letter, and if you don't respond, I guess you don't have the insurance.
Back to Mr. Loran.
Now, this is a public hearing, and you're not making any decisions tonight, but you gotta take some action within a certain time period.
Yes.
And what is your time period?
Well, the time period is once we meet in a joint session and vote with a resolution to establish a fire district. Supposedly, the saying is in the best interest of the public to form that fire district. Then there's a timetable that comes after that.
Is that gonna be a public meeting, or is that a closed room meeting?
Well, no, that meeting has to be open to the public. Oh, yeah, it's an
We-
advertised meeting, you can't do that
We
behind
we
closed
don't,
doors.
we don't hold closed doors, closed door meetings that I'm aware of.
Executive sessions.
Just executive sessions, but that will, you can't vote in executive sessions.
No, but you can do a lot of talking.
Well, we don't hold many of them.
Yeah. And executive sessions, according to statute, are very limited in what you can discuss in the executive sessions. Contracts, disciplinary actions. But then, as the supervisor indicated, you can't take any action. You have to come out of the executive session for personnel. Yeah, that's a pretty wide brush.
The decision that we make, you still have the opportunity to void our decision by a permissive referendum act, which says if you go get 10% of the gubernatorial race, and you get a petition with 10% of that race on your petition, saying that we want the town to put this to a public referendum, we have to do it.
So when are you planning to make this next meeting to vote on it?
That has not been decided yet.
Before we can do that, we'd have to
Advertise for the meeting. and-
right, and discuss what we would be doing.
I'm waiting for that inventory to come back from them, true and accurate inventory.
If you want to find out, have a sale.
Well, that would be one way.
But could you,
Finding $100,000.
along the same
Just a
topic,
minute.
could you explain?
You done, Dick? Are you done?
Could you explain who does what? The village votes to disband the fire department and to join a joint fire district?
That's what all has to be worked out before both of us can vote. Let's assume that we find, after these meetings, that the village and the town boards agree on what should be done. And that's the first thing. Do both boards actually agree to go ahead with the formation? Then we have to sit down and work out the details. We have to put together a resolution that says we will elect versus appoint commissioners. We will handle the transfer of assets and debt this way. And Shannon, I'm sorry, the point you made was...
I'm just wondering what the steps are.
Right.
When you say you both would have to agree that you're headed in the right direction,
Right.
would you have to have separate votes to show that you agree?
Well, we would certainly have to get a sense at our board meetings of where we're coming from, because then you have to do all the work. There's an environmental quality review because we're creating this new government that Arnie has mentioned. That takes some time. They're all, I'm drawing a blank as to other decisions that have to be made, but they all have to be put in this
Has to go before
resolution.
Water control.
Right. The town has probably
State
more...
comptroller has to receive it.
And so what kind of time frame are we looking at?
I think once we vote, we have 45 days to complete the process. Now, how long it will take us to get ready to vote, that really depends, I guess, do we have a meeting of the minds, and then how quickly can we iron out the details?
So can we just be looking at the year 2000, in terms of town budget, January 1, or is that not feasible?
A lot can happen between now and then. If it comes before our preliminary budget, it's possible that we could add more money to the budget. But if it comes after that point, no, you can't add more money to that budget.
Was that early
November the 15th, is it? 20th?
And I think that's, at this point, if we
15th November.
if we did arrive at the agreement, that's when I think the attorneys really have to get involved in terms of helping us through the process. Because it is, as you said, we have to dissolve the fire department, the town has to dissolve the fire protection district. There are a lot of things that have to be done.
We have to go out and get a list of fire commissioners.
Exactly.
That'd probably be the hardest job.
Wouldn't, doesn't our fire protection contract expire at the end of the year, so the whole county take care of itself?
Yeah, but what you're doing is you're dissolving the fire protection area.
And if the contract runs out according to its terms, I think that takes care of itself.
The fire contract does, yes, but not the dissolving of the fire district or the fire protection area. See, the fire protection area will have to be dissolved, and the board, if they decide to go this way, would pass first of all, they would dissolve the fire protection. The second resolution would be called upon to adopt a fire district. And then all that would be the process to start.
6 months.
And like you say, the CEQA has to be in before. You have to go to the comptroller. He has to review it. You have to send him a budget of what your expenditures are going to be. I might add that another good point too for our commissioners is that within 90 days after their budget year, they have to submit to the town clerk a statement of expenditures. Now, this is another cross-check that the public has, because I would suggest that this be a matter of public record for anybody that wants to explore it, to see what their expenditures are. In other words, expenditures versus budget. You budget $176,000, what are your true expenditures? Were they 106 or 176? Or were they 150? That gives you a general idea. I mean, there was much discussion on, what does the village actually spend on their fire budget? Well, with the fire commission, you do know that. I think, is that 90 days? Or?
Yes, it's actually due 60 days.
60 days?
Right, and you can apply for one extension of an additional 60 days. Failure of the treasurer to supply that is guilty of a misdemeanor and a fine of up to $5 per day for every day late.
So, it's just another cross-check.
If someone wanted to go for referendum, when does that have to be into the board?
Well, you have a period of 30 days when the public referendum is submitted. After the vote of the board to establish the fire district, you have 30 days from that period in which to submit a petition to the board. Now, they would be separate petitions. They would be a petition from the people in the town outside area to the town board, and if the village people wanted a permissive referendum, they would have to start one from the village and submit it to the village board.
This be a special election or what?
Not the first one. The first, you mean for the commissioners?
No, the referendum.
Oh, that would put it to public if you come in with a permissive and said, look, we want to vote on this, then you would have to go to public referendum. You'd have to hold a special election.
Actually, it depends on the timing. If it's within a time period for the general election, right, it would go on the general election ballot.
But it's too late for the general for this year.
Yeah. You can't make it on the general, then it's...
What Henry is saying, that if you were in time to meet the general election time, then it would go on the general election. You're too late for that now for this year, so it would have to be a special election. I don't know, what is the time frame in which you must schedule an election?
Relative to this particular issue,
Yeah.
I think it's within, I'm just guessing, I think it's within 30 days after you receive the petition. But I can look it up. It's section 91 of the town law provides you with the actual time limitations on a referendum. And before, when the supervisor mentioned the number, it's 5% of the people that have voted in the last gubernatorial election.
What is 5%?
5%. 5%. And then depending upon whether you're a class 1 or a class 2 town, there's a minimum. If you're a class 1 town, it must be at least 100 petition signed by 100 people. And if it's a class 2, then it's signed by a minimum of 25, regardless of what the 5% is. Oh, yeah, I'm sure
You're
that
an
would
old
be.
expert. What class are we?
We're down in the second class.
Second class. So you're saying to me that they have to have at least 25 signatures?
At least 25, correct.
Well, where does the 5% come in?
5%, it must be 5% unless the 5% would be a number lower than 25.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see.
Yeah,
So if that 5% is lower than 25, it must be 25 at least.
Right, exactly.
Okay. So if anybody out there is going to submit a petition, it has to be 5% of the gubernatorial race. Ralph, what was the gubernatorial race? Off the top of your head.
2 years ago.
2 years ago. And how many people voted?
have no idea. How do they count that? The whole
Within-
town, would that be just the town?
Within the area.
But then, yeah, but I don't know how you break that
Well,
out.
that Rouse's Point, they're in the same district.
Yeah,
No one-
You would have to
You can't-
compute, you would have to go back and look to each election district. I assume Rouse's Point is maybe a different, no?
No.
No, you can't break it out individually.
We have to count them too, I guess.
I don't know. Good question. I don't know the answer.
Yeah,
I have to
Well,
look
they're in
into
part
it.
of the election, they're in part of the election district.
Yeah. It would be difficult.
I don't know how you'd break that out. I can call the election bureau tomorrow and find out.
I know there's four districts.
Yeah.
I know that. And
But all the districts have village people in them.
All four districts are a combination of.
Of
Town,
village and
outside, and village
outside.
registered.
There's
I don't know how you figure that. I think if you get 150 names, you're safe.
Yeah, right, right. I think we're the
Anybody that's a registered voter or,
Give me the
wait a minute, is a registered, I would assume that a property owner, even if he's not eligible to vote, can sign that petition.
There's no point starting a petition now. This has to be after a vote's been taken.
But that's the eligibility. If the property, because it so states in the fire law that even though I may not be a voter, but I am a property owner and I live someplace else, I still have a say in that. Isn't that true? As long as I'm at least a property owner and a resident.
I know we're getting towards the end of this, and I would just like to say that I hope the people here are willing to support the fire district. We know that everything costs money nowadays.
Yes.
And this all comes down to money. But if you want a valuable fire department, and if you want good equipment and good men, if you don't support them, you will not have it. If you do, like you have in the past, you will continue to have their support. And I think that the Rouse's Point residents need to know that they need a valuable mutual aid, and we are it. We are it.
What you're saying is very true.
So that if you want a strong neighbor to help you people out in Rouse's Point, you need to also support this town fire district. If you want to be selfish and just go your own way, that's certainly the way you can go if you want to. But I think you need a strong ally, and the Champlain Town Fire District would be it. That's all I have to say.
I just wanted to, because obviously there's, the people who would be starting the referendum are sitting here. People who are interested enough to come and listen and have concerns. And as I was doing this, I don't know who I said it to, but you get so into this, you can't see the forest for the trees anymore. And I know I've talked too much and I should stop talking, but what I would like to hear, because this is a public hearing, if we don't do the fire district, what should we do? What is the alternative? I've been involved in this so long, maybe I can't see it anymore. But how do we solve the problems, the very real problems that I think we put before you in terms of funding? And that, I would really like to hear about that.
Joe, you've had your hand up quite a while and I haven't.
Well, I just want to turn the question to Melissa because I was going to ask it anyhow. If we don't have it, what is the village's, what are they going to do? Because I remember at a meeting, Winter, you said, and thank God I heard you bought a truck for $45,000. You said you can't afford to put any more money into the fire department. Your streets come first.
Right.
I remember that.
Right.
Excuse me. And if they don't go to the district, what is the village going to do? Where are you going to go from here? Because I understand that your tax rate cannot really keep up with the fire department's expenses.
Well, what I can't speak for the whole village. I can, give you
What
a
is your
sense based
plan
on
as
the
member,
budget.
should I say?
Let's say things stayed the same and the 84-cent tax rate comes out from the town and we get our $55,000 for next year and the year after. I think what you'll see is pretty constant spending. I think you'll see us spend about $95,000 a year. Village residents will still be paying about 40 cents more per thousand than people protected in the town. What we won't have is money put into a capital reserve. That money's just not there. If I'm going to do it, the only place I can go is to the village residents and say, okay, we need to prepare for the future, so I need you to pay more. You're already paying 40 cents more per thousand. I need you to pay more than that. Now, of course, the town could choose to up their contribution. They could, without a fire district, the town could just give us more money. But I see a real problem in that because, as you listen between the lines here, there's still a village-town thing out there. You know, that I could print papers till we have no ink left in the village and talk till I'm hoarse. People are still gonna think we're taking that $55,000. I don't know what they think we're doing with it, but they think it's going somewhere. It's not going into fire. So if it's 75, isn't it gonna be worse? If it's 75,000 and no control from the town, isn't it gonna be worse? I mean, we could do that, Joe, but does it solve our problems? I don't know.
What you're saying, there's still a town-village thing out here. It's true. You're probably too young to remember, but it was the same thing when we had Champlain School and Rouse's Point School. Then they wanted to go central. That'll never work, but it takes a while to do it. You know what I'm saying? But I think what some of the people in the town want to know is, if we're paying more, what more are we going to get for our money? And things that I've heard from talking at work and around, people are saying, first of all, that the fire station in Champlain isn't centrally located if we're going to pay that extra for town money. You know, and of course, this all goes back to if you had fire commissioners. That would have to be a choice down the line, what they want to do. To me, I'm 5 miles from Rouse's Point. I'm 4 miles from Champlain. So I'm right in the middle. That's all I want to say there. Yeah, I think we need, I don't mind paying more, on a sense, but what are we getting more? And that's what I think everybody that's in the town wants to know. And if you, I know talking with, I don't know if George is still here, what goes back years when I was in the fire department, I don't really think our fire districts are aligned properly. I remember going to a fire on the Stetson Road, where before they had the automatic mutual aid, Shazy was there. I mean, Rouse's Point's district goes to the Lorna farm, right? Or to the railroad track.
Lauren farm.
You know, I mean, where is it closer for Rouse's Point to be there? Champlain's probably closer, faster response time. But Shazy, what is it, a matter of 2 miles? This is something that should be looked at.
There are so many issues out there like that, and pay, you know, the retirement Arnie's talks about for firemen, and should we charge for ambulance districts. In all honesty, I think these two boards have put in the amount of time, and despite what you may hear, that they're probably going to put in on these issues. And I really think that's another argument for fire commissioners who can focus, you know, on those things. Should those districts be redrawn? You know, that kind of thing.
The other thing, what I would have liked to see when we're on the committee together, is I don't really see a breakdown of ambulance calls on that. It just has EMS service. I'd like to see a breakdown, because then everybody, it might support something what Ken says, and then a lot of the ambulance calls Rouse's Point has, I'm sure, is outside.
We did, Arnie asked me for that after the last meeting. It didn't get in the packet, but out of our 398 calls, 235 were EMS. Now, if I'm using the wrong terminology, I meant to ask for ambulance calls. Would that be right?
EMS is
Okay, so 235 out of, say, 400 were EMS calls, according to the breakdown that Woody gave me for 98. And I think that, I don't know if Chris is here, but I think they had to go back through and break all those out. I don't know if you worked with Woody on that, Chris.
Well, we went back to 98, 97.
Okay.
So the difference...
70%, 30% anyway. 70% EMS, 30% fire.
Okay, 70-30, which makes a difference when you're looking at it, according to what Ken says. So I'll stop. My 5 minutes done. I got one issue with Mr. Young. You made a statement earlier saying the reason probably why we're losing a lot of volunteers is they're tired of raising money, going out with a bucket. I've never seen that before. There's nobody, I think why we're losing volunteers, there's too much politics, first of all. Second of all, the state, and I remember George Rivers saying 20 years ago, when state gets involved, you're not going to have a say in it. The state is asking for too much training, and possibly, I've never, in these fire departments here, I may be wrong, Champlain, there's not one volunteer asked or made to serve on a fundraiser. Because I know when I was in it was always, we're a volunteer. If you want to work on the fundraiser, you can. There's very few fire departments in the county where you're seeing people out there with a bucket or whatever. Your field days are going away slowly, definitely. But I think because of politics and all the training, you just can't afford to do it anymore.
You're correct relative to the mandated training that is now required. In 1980, then Governor Carey signed a bill making OSHA applicable to the volunteer firefighters in the state of New York. He said he realized this was an unfunded mandate and that the legislature would have to deal with it. That was in 1980. They never did deal with it. They still haven't provided us with a dime of being able to go out and buy all the new gear that they required. The training is going up astronomically as far as what the volunteers have to put in. As bad as it is for the fire service, it's 10 times worse for the EMS service, I'm sure, as Ken can point out. We have trouble because I think they need 300 hours every 2 or 3 years of recertification. I mean, that's a tremendous amount of time for a volunteer to put in. So those are probably the biggest causes. But also, I hear, and there are fire departments which do require that you participate in fundraising. I'm a member of a fire department. I just spent last Thursday night down there stuffing envelopes.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
If you remember, I know some of the ones around here, George or Ken, you can help me. How many fire departments in Clinton County have their retirement or incentive?
3.
3. And are you one of these? Is your department one of
Yes,
these?
they have.
Okay,
They were
that
the
is
first
one of
one
them
in
there.
the state.
Because you get points towards your retirement.
Right, exactly.
But you're mandated by them points to do all those things.
Correct.
Or you don't get it.
Yep, correct.
You know, and I want to go on record and saying, whether they do go with a district or don't, I honestly believe that the volunteers should have some kind of retirement or some kind of, something for them in the end, because you are losing.
Incentive program.
Some kind of incentive, and it's true.
What they've found across the state of New York is that the incentive program doesn't attract new people to the fire department. Because somebody who's 21, 22 years old, the last thing they want to hear about is retirement when I'm 65. You know, what does it mean to you? What it does do, though, it takes the individual who is 42 and 43 and 44, who's been a member of the department for 15, 20 years, who's getting sick and tired of going down to the firehouse. Now, all of a sudden, he gets points if he goes down to the firehouse, and it encourages him to be more active in the fire department than he would have been but for the existence of the program. But that's a whole nother topic.
We do a lot of fundraising only because it's expected of us. When I got in, it's like tradition that you fundraise. But if you think about it, if Bob or Sam Castine were to show up at your doorstep and asking for money, you'd be pretty appalled. And why should it be different for fire and EMS service? I mean, it's true. If Sam Castine came to my door and said, hey, I got to buy a new plow, need some money, I'd probably ask him to leave.
You know, one of the councilmen on this board, town board, said to me one time, they shouldn't be putting on these fundraising benefits. We should be putting them on for them. And he's 100% true. But one thing I like to add is I went to your breakfast, both of you. You guys seem to have an awful lot of fun in the kitchen. You think you could ever get them out of there? But what you're saying is you shouldn't have to go out doing fundraisers to get the money that it takes for you to volunteer your service and to go out and protect this community, not getting any compensation, and have to go out and buy your own tools to do a job.
It's just expected of us. I guess.
Well,
We got to get out of that
shouldn't be
way.
that way.
You're right.
Yes, George.
Just to add what he's saying, you know, we put on the 4th of July celebration. We turned back to the village $250,000. And we never so much as got a thank you from the village board. Never, our 100th anniversary as a department, they didn't even recognize us.
Didn't give you a resolution.
And then they expect us to go out and continue to do it? Well, I was fire chief at the time, I said enough is enough, that's it. We don't give the village another penny.
When you had the volunteer force, and you remember when you had a force that you had members out there and waiting to get on to the fire
Well,
department?
I remember that.
And I think everybody in their subconscious said, well, I've got all these volunteers, why should I help them? But I think they are realizing now that the time has come, the volunteers are not there. What are you going to do to keep them? And I think you're going to have to spend more money eventually. It's either help the volunteer or pay for the fire department full-time.
City Fire Department's career, do they ask them to go out and raise funds for their equipment?
I don't think it's in their contract.
Yeah, right.
It's a union issue. But I would like to simply say that, you know, this board, and I'm sure the board of Champlain, has great respect for the volunteer, and we want to do the best thing that we can for them. And we also want to help the taxpayer. But the volunteer force is greatly appreciated here. We know what you did, especially during the ice storm. without you guys, I don't think a lot of people would have survived in a real good state. Some of them would have suffered a lot more. Okay, Dick.
Is it possible for the village board and the town board make an agreement to make it on assessed valuation and let the fire department submit their budget to them? Because, and then allow them to put $30,000 or $40,000 away a year? Because $20,000, and if you want to pay $200 for a truck, $20,000 doesn't go very far.
So, did we say keep the current organization,
Base it on assessed
base it on
valuation.
equally on assessed valuation regardless of village or town, and increase that budget?
Yes.
Well, I don't think it solves the organizational problems, but it certainly, I don't think anybody's gonna throw you out the door for suggesting that.
Why wouldn't it solve their problem? Then both boards would have the input in that budget.
Oh, both boards
I
would
don't
get
think you
to.
have the authority to manage a village budget. There's no authority that I know of out there for you to have any power over their budget. So in other words, the mayor could tell me, go to heaven. I'm not going to change my budget.
I've said that many times.
Yes.
The problem is, it may work, but 5 years down the road, you may not be supervisor.
I may not be there, and
She may not be mayor.
That's, well,
may be here, but I won't be here.
that's really my concern.
It's illegal.
I don't think it can be done. I don't think you can tell another board what to do with their budget. It's their budget.
You're just an advisor.
Right.
Well,
That actually was one of the questions that John was asking Mr. Young about. We asked them, or asked him to respond. What if we created an independent fire department, divested it from the village, and we both contracted with them? So we would both get a shot at their budget, we would both pay equally based on assessed value. But what if we don't agree? What if the village says that's a great budget and the town says it's too high? Or the town says it's not high enough and the village says it's too high? I think there's a problem with the organization of it, if we wanted to do that.
Don't you have that problem now between the village board and the town board when you're doing budget? Not everybody agrees. You work out something, don't you?
It's illegal.
well, we used to compromise on their fire budget, but there hasn't been too much compromise lately.
I think Joe's talking about with our own
Within your own budgets, I'm saying. I know it may be illegal, George, but if it could be done, I mean, you're saying you can't do that, but you have that same problem now within your own budgets. If you all agree, great.
Well, the only thing you got is you have 5 more people agreeing.
I know, crowd's too
And,
much.
it's hard to get 3 sometimes, much less 10.
7 years ago, we started this, or 8 years ago, we started this group of us, and we got together. In that time period, we've had 2 supervisors, with all due respect, we've had 3 mayors, and we've had a whole change of village and town council people, village people. And we've also had different committee members. So you almost, what Dick is saying is almost right, but not only is it illegal, but it's kind of hard to play politics with fire and EMS service. There has to be some type of constant government, like there is here in the town, like there is in the village. Yes, it is expensive, but this is a long-term problem that's catching up to us. We can go in the station, we can talk about it, how the trucks are aging, all that kind of stuff. It's not just the fire trucks, or it's just not the ambulance, which is we're going to have to buy another ambulance in another 4 years probably. It's a combination of things, and this is where the commissioners can plan. It's not, and they're just not going to take care of the debt currently. They're going to take care of the future. They're going to take care of making sure in another 2 years we have an ambulance. So it's a matter of consistent planning.
And that is the problem with the let's say that we wanted to put 40,000 away, so the town wanted to send us $106,000 next year, okay? Because that's what it would take to even out our tax rate and put 40,000 into the capital reserve. I don't know how long these gentlemen would be in office. I might have signed a contract with somebody who the next time the town taxpayers can get a shot at them, they're gone. I don't know. And if I want to, plan to buy an ambulance, I may have to look at, let's say something catastrophic happens to the ambulance, and we have to replace it. I'm gonna have to bond for it. Even if I have $40,000 in my capital reserve, it's not gonna pay for the whole ambulance. I don't know that next year, that 106,000 is gonna be there, or even that 86,000 is gonna be there. I might get told, 56,000 is the best we can do. So it does make that, while it, obviously put a smile on my face in terms of giving it to me next year, it makes that long-range planning very hard. Very hard.
You've got to go to the town fire district. You're talking about putting money aside. You have $20,000 you're putting aside next year. You're saying you're going to need a new ambulance in 4 years. That makes it 9 or 10 years old. The cost is going to be a minimum of $100,000. So what happens? You're going to buy any fire equipment in the next 5 years? I think they want to buy. They're going to need more fire equipment also. So you're not putting near enough aside. You have to face facts. Fire departments and ambulance service cost money. And if you don't get behind it, you don't have the service. It's as simple as that.
You won't get the quality service.
That's right, you won't get the quality
It's all a
service.
matter of management. We're just looking for a consistent management is what we're looking for.
Yeah.
And it's not saying that the village was managed better, town, it's nothing like that. It's just that it's overwhelming us as fire and EMS people that we need some type of management or a board, whatever you want it, fire commissioners. But there's a lot to it, and there's a lot of things available to us. 5 years ago, we looked into the retirement that Joe talked about. We just faced the facts, and we couldn't afford it. Just couldn't afford it, and Northern Insurance told us, you guys really need to be a district to do this. Well, that kind of hurt a little bit because we're not a district. So and things like, I don't want to, but things like charging, there's a lot of options out there, and also a lot of low-interest loans out there that are available if you're a district. The firemen just think together and say, hey, one day we want a district. It just didn't happen that way. Because we saved, we built our own trucks. I think we can say that Champlain's been doing their part. The fire people anyway, EMS people. And Ross's Point's been doing their part. Ross Point has a good tax base in our village, and through the help of Wyatt Harris, and Wyatt has helped us too. That's another thing, our manpower. I hate to say this, but if it wasn't for Wyatt, I don't think we'd have the manpower that we have. There's times that we have to leave work to answer an EMS call, answer a fire call. Well, I don't think it's Wyatt's or Harris or Bombardier or anybody's responsibility to help us out with that. I think we have to take responsibility as town citizens, which includes both villages, to do that. I don't mind getting out of work for an hour or two, but it's getting to the point where everybody has to sacrifice their jobs or make a decision. Usually that decision is, hey, I'm going to stick with my job. Who suffers? The town people suffer out of that. So it's that long-range planning again that we have to think about. We have to take responsibility as people in the town to take care of this problem. And I believe that's what Ken's talking about. That's what George talked about. Once we lose these guys, I don't think we're going to be that lucky.
Well, the money's driven out of the taxpayer, no matter who does the taxing. And you brought up a good point, is managing it. How it's managed.
Just the management of it, folks. That's all we're looking for. Just, and as fire chiefs and assistant chiefs and all that kind of stuff, we can't manage this. We don't have the time. You guys don't have the time. Next year maybe could. We say, okay, well, we need a new ambulance. Well, a few years ago when we went for that new ambulance, we gave the village $45,000 from Niagara Home, roughly. And Champlain Rescue Incorporated. Well, had we not had done that, we would have found a way to get the ambulance. But you probably wouldn't be able to get the backhoe you've been looking for, or something. What do we have to sacrifice? It's planning. It's all about planning and management. Long term, short term, and now.
It's very true. Carl, do you have anything you'd like to say? All that wisdom that you had?
After listening to everybody talk, I'm sitting back and I'm saying, do we want to go back to the 1920s or do we want to go ahead?
Remember when you used to pick them up? You pick them up in a hearse and you take them there. Sometimes you waited in case you had to bring them back.
I can remember when our fire department had to be towed to fire truck had to be towed to a fire. Kenny will know, will verify that.
You had to jump out of the truck and push it over,
I don't think we want to go back to that.
Times have changed. I mean, we used to call you when we had a wreck, and you'd pick us up, and you didn't have an EMT there. You maybe had little Timmy in the back.
The state wasn't, they hadn't stuck
Hadn't
their
got it
nose
in
yet.
there yet.
They were sticking in the window, but they hadn't come in yet.
So then we went to an ambulance, and now we got an ambulance to pick us up, but we didn't have any EMTs on there yet. You know, we had just regular Joes. And the more we expect, the more we require, the more it costs us. So if you want to go back, you can step back, and you can save money. But I'm sure if I'm laying there with a heart attack, I don't give a damn what you're going to charge me. I want you to be there. Well, just with a general, show of hands, how many people are in favor of a district? I mean, you don't have to put your hand up if you don't want to. I won't ask the ones that are not in favor of it because I wouldn't want to embarrass anybody. I have one hand showing back there. I have two hands. Okay, I thank you very much for coming out tonight. I appreciate.
I'll say one thing. The Rouse's Point EMS and Fire Department always support Champlain, because, well, which direction you go to. We've worked together in the past, and we'll always work together in the future. So the people of the town will never have to worry for coverage. We all will be there back in Champlain now, regardless which way you go.
Thank you very much. In just a moment, Mr. Van Acker would like to explain something on referendum if you want. I don't want anybody to go away misinformed here.
The question was raised about permissive referendum, a permissive referendum, and I would say that the number of signatures required on the petition would be 5% of that cast at the prior election for governor. So somewhere around 1,000 or 1,500 people, I think, usually vote at a general election here in the town. So that would mean something like 50 to 75 people would have to sign the petition. That petition has to be submitted within 30 days of the time the board acts on the resolution. Then within between 60 and 75 days after the petition is presented, the town would have to hold the special election. Once again, that's assuming that there's not time enough to get it on the general ballot. So anyway, that's an addition. Oh, and the people who can vote at the election are those in the district affected, the electors in the district affected.
Now, if it's on the ballot, you got to be a registered voter to vote, not a homeowner.
Well, it says qualified electors. I'm not sure that.
So that means, that would mean registered voters.
Yeah, people that can normally vote at an election
Yeah,
are.
not, because what was stated before was home owners. All homeowners are not registered voters.
Right, they're not qualified
Right.
electors, registered voters.
So those people don't have no say
So
if they're not registered.
that's the end of it. I hope I answered some of the questions that were raised, but that's all I have to say.